The gavel slammed down like a thunderclap in the quiet courtroom. But Kendall Rivera did not flinch. She had waited 18 years for this moment. Her fingers gripping the edge of the wooden table until her knuckles whitened. The air thick with the scent of polished oak and stale coffee from the bailiff's thermos. Across the room, Morgan Ellis sat frozen. Her green eyes locked on Kendall's. A silent plea hanging between them like smoke from a dying fire. Kendall's heart pounded as the judge cleared his throat. His voice gravelly from too many cigarettes and not enough sleep. Ms. Rivera. Your petition to reopen the case against Willow Creek Ministries is granted. We will proceed to discovery. The words landed soft at first, then built into a roar in her ears. She exhaled. A long shaky breath that carried the weight of all those lost summers. The forced prayers. The nights she had cried herself raw into her pillow. It started back in 2007. In the sticky heat of a Texas summer that clung to your skin like regret. Kendall was 19. Fresh out of community college with dreams of law school buzzing in her veins like cheap tequila. She worked shifts at a diner in Austin, slinging plates of brisket and eggs to hungover frat boys. Her tips funding the beat-up Chevy she shared with her abuela. That's where she met Morgan. 20 and wide-eyed. A transfer student from Oregon studying literature at UT. Who came in every Tuesday for black coffee in the corner booth. Her nose buried in dog-eared copies of Virginia Woolf. Their first real conversation happened over a spilled tray of fries. Kendall had been rushing, her apron stained with grease, when her heel caught on a loose floor mat. The crash echoed through the diner, drawing stares from the lunch crowd. Morgan looked up from her book. Not with pity, but with this quiet spark. Like she saw the chaos and wanted to dive right in. Hey. You okay? She asked. Sliding out of the booth to help pick up the mess. Her fingers brushing Kendall's as they reached for the same fry basket. That touch lingered. Electric. A promise neither of them named yet. By week's end, they were stealing kisses in the alley behind the diner. The brick wall rough against Kendall's back. Morgan's laughter soft and breathless against her neck. It felt like freedom. Like the world had cracked open just for them. They drove out to the hill country on weekends. Windows down. Radio blasting Lucinda Williams. Parking under stars that seemed close enough to touch. Morgan would trace patterns on Kendall's thigh with her fingertips. Whispering about books where women loved fiercely and without apology. Kendall, who had grown up in a house of rosaries and stern lectures from her evangelical parents, felt seen for the first time. Her guarded heart unfolding like a fist finally releasing. But secrets in a small city have a way of unraveling. Kendall's father, a deacon at the local Baptist church, found the Polaroids tucked in her glove compartment. Blurry shots of them tangled in bedsheets at a cheap motel. He did not yell that night. He sat her down at the kitchen table. Bible open to Romans 1. His voice steady as he quoted verses about abomination and redemption. This isn't you, Mija, he said. Tears in his eyes that cut deeper than anger. God has a plan. We'll fix this. Morgan's family was no better. Her parents, conservative transplants from the Midwest, had moved to Austin for her father's job at a tech firm. When she confessed over Sunday dinner, her mother's fork clattered against the plate, and her father stormed out to the garage, muttering about disappointment. They called it an intervention, but it was a trap. 2 weeks later, both girls were packed off to Willow Creek Ministries, a sprawling compound outside Dallas disguised as a Christian retreat center. The brochure promised healing through faith. But Kendall knew better even then. She had read the horror stories online. Whispers of electroshock and isolation, buried under layers of prayer circles and group confessions. The van ride there was silent torture. Kendall and Morgan sat in the back, hands inches apart but not touching, under the watchful eyes of a church counselor named Brother Elias. He droned on about purity and surrender, his cologne heavy in the humid air. Morgan squeezed her eyes shut, a single tear escaping, and Kendall wanted to scream, to shatter the windows with her fists. But she bit her tongue, tasting blood, because fighting now meant losing everything. Willow Creek was hell wrapped in white picket fences. Low-slung buildings painted in soft pastels, surrounded by pecan orchards that rustled like judgmental whispers in the wind. They separated the girls immediately. Kendall to the women's dormitory. Morgan to a cottage for youth in crisis. No contact. They said. It was for the best. Kendall's days blurred into a rhythm of enforced normalcy. Wake at dawn for Bible study, where Sister Ruth led them in chants about fleeing youthful lusts. Breakfast was oatmeal laced with scripture readings. Then hours of reparative therapy, where counselors probed your memories like surgeons with dull knives. Tell me about the temptation, Dr. Harlan would say. His clipboard balanced on his knee. Eyes cold behind wire-rimmed glasses. Kendall stared at the floor. The worn carpet fibers mocking her. And spun lies about confusion. About boys from high school she had never wanted. Inside, she clung to fragments of Morgan. The curve of her smile. The way her hair smelled like lavender shampoo after rain. Nights were worse. Curfew at 8. Lights out by 9. But sleep evaded her. She lay on her bunk. The thin mattress creaking under her weight. Listening to the muffled sobs from the girl above. The walls were thin. Papered with faded prints of Jesus in the garden. And every creak of the floorboards felt like footsteps closing in. One evening, during a testimony circle, Kendall cracked. They had been sharing stories of deliverance. Fabricated tales of sudden attractions to men after fervent prayer. When it was her turn, the words stuck in her throat. A lump of fire. I don't want to change, she whispered. So quiet the room almost missed it. Sister Ruth's face hardened. And by morning, Kendall was strapped to a chair in the aversion room. Electrodes humming against her temples. The shocks were not constant. But they came without warning. Triggered by slides projected on a screen. Images of women embracing. Soft lips meeting. Pain lanced through her skull. White hot. Leaving her gasping. Sweat soaking her gown. This is mercy, Dr. Harlan murmured. Adjusting the dials. Pain now to spare eternal torment. Kendall vomited into a basin afterward. Her body shaking. But the real agony was the erosion. The slow chipping away at who she was. Morgan fared no better. From stolen glimpses during group meals, Kendall saw the hollows under her eyes. The way she picked at her food like it was ash. Once, in the chapel, their gazes met across the pews. And Morgan mouthed, I love you, her lips trembling. Kendall nodded. Fierce. But that night, the dreams came. Vivid and cruel. Of holding her. Only to watch her dissolve into smoke. Months dragged on. Marked by forced dates with suitable men from local churches. Awkward suppers where hands stayed folded in laps and conversation skirted anything real. Kendall endured it all. Her fire banked but not extinguished. Fueled by letters she wrote in secret and burned at midnight. Pages filled with promises to Morgan she could not deliver. Then, the breaking point. A new girl arrived. Barely 18. With bruises hidden under long sleeves and a story of being dragged there by her uncle after a neighbor's tip. She confided in Kendall during laundry duty. Whispering of suicide attempts and locked closets. That night, as thunder rolled over the plains, Kendall slipped a shard of broken mirror into the girl's palm. Use it if you have to, she said. Voice cracking. But run first. The girl did not run. She slashed her wrists in the bathroom. Blood pooling on the tile like spilled wine. The center locked down. Investigations whispered but quickly quashed by influential donors. Kendall and Morgan were released early. Deemed progressed enough, their families too ashamed to protest. But the damage lingered. A scar tissue over their souls. Back in Austin, they tried to reconnect. A hurried phone call. Then a meeting at a park. But the world had shifted. Morgan's parents had pulled her from school. Shipped her home to Portland. Kendall's father watched her like a hawk. Quoting proverbs at dinner. Their goodbye was a brush of fingers under a picnic table. Eyes wet. Words choked. We'll find each other, Morgan breathed. Kendall believed it then. With the desperation of youth. Years passed in fragments. Kendall threw herself into pre-law at a state school in Houston. Nights blurred by textbooks and black coffee. Days haunted by flashbacks that left her trembling in lecture halls. She dated men to appease her mother. Stiff encounters that ended in polite goodbyes. Her body screaming betrayal. Therapy helped. Marginally. A kind-faced woman in a strip mall office who nodded without judgment. But the rage simmered. A pot left too long on the stove. Morgan vanished into the Pacific Northwest. Surfacing in postcards that arrived sporadic. Postmarked from Seattle coffee shops. "I'm reading again," one said. "Thinking of you under these gray skies." Kendall kept them in a shoebox. Hidden under her bed. Pulling them out on birthdays when the ache grew too sharp. By 2018, Kendall had her JD from Baylor. A clerkship in San Francisco that paid enough for a studio overlooking the bay. The city was a bomb. Rainbow flags fluttering from every lamppost. Women holding hands on Market Street without a second glance. She came out fully then. Tentative at first. Then fierce. Joining a support group for ex-gay survivors. That's where she heard the stories. Echoes of Willow Creek. Lives shattered by the same hands. The lawsuit brewed slowly. A storm gathering over years. Kendall connected with a nonprofit. Lambda Legal. Where a senior attorney named Reyes took her case pro bono. "We can expose them," he said. Maps of the compound spread across his desk. "Not just for you. But for every kid they broke." Kendall nodded. But it was Morgan's face she saw. The girl she had failed to save. Finding Morgan took months. A trail of dead ends from Portland bookstores to a small press in Eugene. The call came on a rainy Tuesday. Kendall pacing her apartment. Phone to her ear. "Kendall?" Morgan's voice. Softer now. Threaded with caution. Silence stretched. Then a sob. Mutual. Raw. "I never stopped," Morgan whispered. Not for a second. They met in person at a diner in Oakland. Neutral ground. The vinyl booths cracked like old skin. Morgan arrived first. Nursing a tea. Her hair longer now. Freckles faded but eyes the same green sea. Kendall slid in across from her. Heart hammering. "You look good," she said. Lame. But true. Morgan reached across. Fingers lacing with hers. And the world righted itself. Just a fraction. Over plates of pancakes gone cold. They unpacked the years. Morgan had married briefly. A man from her church days. Divorced after 2 years of faking it. She ran a used bookstore now. Shelves crammed with queer lit and poetry that sang of forbidden loves. "I wrote," she admitted. Cheeks flushing. "About us." Burned most of it. Kendall confessed her own ghosts. The nightmares that woke her gasping. The way she still flinched at Bible verses on billboards. The spark reignited slow. Tentative. Over walks along the Embarcadero. Fog rolling in like a shared secret. They kissed for the first time in years under the Bay Bridge. Salt air sharp on their tongues. Morgan's hands cupping Kendall's face like she was fragile porcelain. It was not fireworks. But embers. Deep and sustaining. A fire banked against the wind. As the lawsuit gained traction. Depositions loomed. Willow Creek's lawyers circling like vultures. Kendall prepared relentlessly. Poring over files in her firm's glass-walled office. The city lights blurring below. Morgan stood by her. Quiet strength. Bringing takeout from dim sum spots and reading aloud from Audre Lorde until Kendall's tension eased. But doubt crept in. Insidious. Late nights. Kendall would stare at the ceiling. Morgan asleep beside her. And wonder if the pain was worth dredging up. "What if we lose?" she murmured one dawn. Voice thick. Morgan stirred. Pulling her close. Breath warm against her collarbone. "Then we fight again. Together this time." The first hearing was in federal court. Dallas humidity seeping through the vents. Kendall took the stand. Voice steady as she recounted the shocks. The isolation. The way they stripped her of self. Jurors leaned forward. Faces etched with discomfort. But she held their gaze, channeling the girl who had survived. Morgan sat in the gallery, hand over her mouth, tears silent. Cross-examination was brutal. The defense attorney, a slick Houston type with a drawl like honeyed venom. Ms. Rivera. Isn't it possible this was consensual treatment? A spiritual journey? He leaned in, smirking. Kendall paused, breath catching. Then met his eyes. It was torture. And you know it. Adjournment brought no relief. Just the crush of reporters outside the courthouse. Microphones thrust like spears. Kendall pushed through. Morgan's arm linked in hers. Their steps synced from years of imagined dances. Back in the hotel. A sterile chain off the interstate. They collapsed onto the bed. Suits rumpled. The air conditioner humming a monotonous dirge. You were incredible, Morgan said, tracing the line of Kendall's jaw with her thumb. A touch that sent shivers racing down her spine. Kendall turned into it. Lips brushing Morgan's palm. Tasting salt from the day's sweat. I saw you up there. Kept me going. They made love then. Slow and reverent. Bodies rediscovering paths long overgrown. Morgan's sighs were poetry. Soft gasps that echoed the rain pattering against the window. And Kendall lost herself in the rhythm. The way Morgan arched like a wave cresting. Afterward. Tangled in sheets that smelled of bleach in them. Kendall felt the first real peace in years. A quiet harbor after storm-tossed seas. But mornings brought the grind back. Discovery phase dragged through fall. Emails ping-ponging between attorneys. Subpoenas stacking like cordwood. Willow Creek fought dirty. Dredging up old psyche valves twisted to paint Kendall as unstable. A confused youth seeking attention. One deposition. In a conference room with faux wood paneling. Had the center's founder, Elder Grant, on video link from his Florida retirement. His face filled the screen. Jolly and serene. Eyes like chips of flint. We saved souls, he intoned. Voice quavering with practiced piety. If it hurt, it was the devil's grip loosening. Kendall's lawyer, Reyes, hammered him on specifics. Pulling records of unreported incidents. The girl who had bled out on tile now a ghost in black and white. Grant shifted. Sweat beading on his brow despite the AC. Tragedies happen in healing. Morgan watched from the corner. Fists clenched in her lap. And later? In the car? She broke. How do they sleep? She whispered. Voice fracturing. Kendall pulled over at a gas station. Neon buzzing overhead. And held her as sobs racked her frame. The pump's steady beep a counterpoint to their grief. They escaped to New Orleans for a weekend. Reyes insisting on a break before the next round. The city pulsed with jazz spilling from French Quarter doorways. Air thick with beignet and bourbon. They wandered Bourbon Street at dusk. Hands swinging loose. Morgan's laughter bubbling up at a street performer's fire tricks. In a courtyard bistro. Candlelight flickering on wrought iron. They shared étouffée and stories. The kind that healed. Remember that time in the orchards? Kendall asked. Fork midway to mouth. Morgan nodded. Eyes distant. I picked a pecan for you. Kept it in my pocket till it crumbled. That night? In a creaky bed and breakfast overlooking Jackson Square. They talked futures. Morgan dreamed of expanding her bookstore. A queer haven with reading nooks and author events. Kendall spoke of partnership track. But softer now. Of a life beyond briefs and billables. Adopt. Maybe, she said tentative. Watching Morgan's face. A smile bloomed. Slow and sure. With you? Yeah. I'd like that. Reality intruded via certified mail. A motion to dismiss citing statute of limitations. Reyes cursed in Spanish over speakerphone. Pacing his office with its view of the bay. They're banking on us folding. Kendall refused. Fire in her belly. She dove deeper. Allying with survivors nationwide. Virtual meetings where voices cracked over Zoom. Sharing scars like communal bread. One woman from Alabama described ice baths for impure thoughts, another from Georgia the forced marriages that followed. Their collective rage fueled her. A bonfire against the dark. Holiday season hit like a freight train. Thanksgiving at Kendall's abuela's in the Mission District. Tamales steaming on the table. Cousins chattering in Spanglish. Abuela pulled her aside after grace. Arthritic hands cupping Kendall's face. I knew. Mia. About the therapy. Prayed every day. Tears pricked. Unexpected. Why didn't you say? Abuela shrugged. Eyes twinkling. You were fighting your war. Now you win it. Morgan flew in for Christmas. Her first time in the city proper. They strung lights on Kendall's tiny balcony. Overlooking fire escapes draped in tinsel. The foghorn moaning distant. Gifts were simple. A leather-bound journal from Morgan. Pages begging for their story. And from Kendall. A locket with a faded Polaroid inside. Them young and unbroken. Making love by tree glow. Ornaments tinkling soft. Felt sacred. Bodies a testament to endurance. New Year brought the motion hearing. Back in Dallas. Snow dusting the steps like powdered sugar. The judge. A stern woman with silver streaks. Listened impassive as arguments flew. Reyes wove precedent like a tapestry. Citing recent rulings gutting conversion bans. The defense countered with religious freedom. A shield battered but unbreached. This isn't about faith, Kendall interjected when called. Voice carrying. It's about harm. Real. Lasting harm to kids who just wanted to love. The judge's gavel echoed again. Denying dismissal. Cheers erupted in the hallway. Hugs from the team. But Kendall sought Morgan's eyes. The anchor in the swell. They celebrated quiet. Boys from a truck stop. Eaten in the rental car with radio low on soul tunes. One step, Morgan murmured. Head on Kendall's shoulder. But God. It feels like miles. Winter thawed into spring. Depositions yielding damning emails. Counselors admitting off-record to doubts. To knowing the methods bordered cruelty. Publicity bloomed. A profile in the Chronicle painting Kendall as warrior. Morgan as quiet muse. Hate mail followed. Bible verses scrawled in red. But so did support. Letters from parents apologizing. From teens whispering thanks. A setback came in April. A key witness recanting. Pressure from church elders bending her will. Kendall raged in Rhea's office. Papers scattering like leaves. We can't let them win. He nodded grim. But eyes weary. That night? Morgan drew a bath in their loft. Salts fizzing. Candles guttering. Breathe, she said. Sponging Kendall's back. Water lapping gentle. They talked strategy till prune-skinned. Then shifted to dreams. Of road trips down Route 66. Windows down. No destinations. May brought Morgan's turn on the stand. Prepped endless and mock sessions. Her voice steadying from tremor to timbre. The courtroom hummed expectant. Air heavy with anticipation. She took the oath. Hands steady. And began. They told me love was sickness. But loving Kendall? That's the healthiest thing I've ever known. Jurors shifted. Some nodding faint. Cross-exam probed her marriage. The divorce. Painting instability. Morgan met it head-on. I tried their way. It nearly killed me. This? She glanced at Kendall. Love raw. This saved me. Adjournment left them drained. Lunch skipped for a nap in the hotel. Bodies spooned. Breath sinking. Afternoon brought leaks. A blogger outing Willow Creek's funding ties to politicians. Threads pulling loose. Momentum shifted. Allies multiplying. A senator from California vowing support. Summer scorched Texas. Hearings adjourned to fall. Giving space for life. They honeymooned unofficial in Big Sur. Cliffside cabin with ocean roar below. Hikes through redwoods where Morgan read Keats aloud. Voice weaving through ferns. Nights by fire pit. Stars pricking velvet sky. Kendall confessed fears. What if victory tastes like ash? Morgan kissed her temple. Then we season it. Together. Back home. Kendall's firm granted leave. Understanding nods from partners. She volunteered at a youth center. Mentoring girls with eyes like her younger self. Fierce and questioning. Morgan hosted book clubs. Discussions on Audrey and Alison Bechdel. Voices rising in solidarity. Their love deepened roots. Mornings with coffee and crosswords. Evenings with vinyl spinning Joni Mitchell. Harmonies wrapping them close. September loomed the trial proper. Jury selection, a chess game of biases unearthed. First day. Kendall in navy suit. Hair pinned severe. Felt the weight settle. Opening statements flew. Reyes painting vivid the center's facade. Defense invoking sanctity. Witnesses paraded. Experts on trauma linking shocks to PTSD. Survivors echoing Kendall's pain. Midway. A bombshell. Elder Grant's health failing. His testimony waived. But records surfaced. Logs of unreported abuses. The girl's death not suicide but despair pushed to edge. Courtroom gasped. Judge banging for order. Kendall's pulse raced. Victory's tang sharp on tongue. October winds whipped through Dallas. Leaves skittering like secrets across the plaza. The trial entered its second week. Tension coiling tighter. Every objection a spark on dry tinder. Kendall testified again. Deeper this time. Peeling back layers to the bone. She described the orchard escapes in her mind. Pecan shells crunching under imagined feet. Morgan's hand in hers a lifeline through the dark. They didn't just hurt my body, she said. Voice cracking on the edge of tears. They tried to erase her from me. From us? The defense pounced. Replaying old tapes from Willow Creek. Kendall's forced confessions. Voice young and hollow. See? She agreed. Jurors frowned. Discomfort rippling. Reyes redirected masterfully. Pulling the thread of coercion. The power imbalance stark as floodlights. Morgan squeezed her hand under the table during breaks. Thumbs rubbing circles. A silent, "You've got this." Nights blurred into strategy sessions in the hotel bar. Bourbon neat for Kendall. Gin and tonic for Morgan. Ice clinking like dice. They dissected days. Laughter punctuating the grim. A shared look across the table sparking heat. One evening. After a grueling cross of a former counselor who crumbled admitting regrets. They slipped away early. Back to the room where rain lashed windows. "You're my hero," Morgan breathed. Unbuttoning Kendall's blouse slow. Fingers reverent. Lovemaking was urgent then. Bodies claiming space in the storm. Gasps mingling with thunder. Fall deepened. Leaves turning crimson. Echoing the flush on Morgan's cheeks when she spoke publicly for the first time. A press conference outside court. Cameras flashed relentless. Her voice steady. This isn't ancient history. It's happening now. To kids like we were. We won't let it. Applause swelled. Strangers hugging her after. Stories tumbling out in whispers. Kendall watched from the crowd. Pride swelling chest tight. Love a fierce bloom. Complications arose mid-month. A juror dismissed for bias. Unearthed social media rants against gay agendas. Selection dragged. But the replacement? A quiet librarian from Fort Worth. Nodded during Kendall's recap. Eyes kind. Momentum held. Though fatigue gnawed. Reyes nursing a cough. Morgan's hands chapped from wringing. They stole a day trip to Waco. Craving normalcy. Magnolia Market bustling with families. Shiplake scents and laughter. Holding hands open. No fear. They browsed cookbooks. Morgan teasing Kendall's aversion to recipes. You burn water. Lunch on picnic tables. Turkey sandwiches and sweet tea. Sun-warming faces. Feels like a date, Kendall said. Ketchup on her lip. Morgan leaned in. Kissing it away. World narrowing to that point of contact. Back in court. The tide turned decisive. A whistleblower. Ex-admin from Willow Creek. Took the stand. Documents in hand proving falsified consents. Kickbacks from donors. His voice shook. But facts landed like hammers. Defense scrambled. Motions flying. But judge denied. Her rulings crisp. Closing arguments dawned gray. Reyes weaving narrative of resilience. A tapestry of Kendall's and Morgan's unbroken. The defense closed with pleas for mercy. Faith's fragile vessel. But it rang hollow. Echoes of empty chapels. Jury deliberated 2 days. Time stretching eternal. Kendall pacing hotel halls. Morgan reading palms to distract. Lines of life and love intersecting. See? Long and tangled. Just like us. Verdict came at dusk. Courtroom packed. Air electric. Foreman stood. Voice even. On count of emotional distress. We find for the plaintiff. Damages awarded. 1 million. Gasps. Then cheers. Hugs cascading. Kendall turned to Morgan. Burying face in her neck. Sobs racking. Relief bittersweet. Willow Creek to shudder. Reforms mandated. A crack in the armor. Aftermath swirled. Press swarming. Offers for books. TED Talks. They retreated to San Francisco. Fog a soft veil. Celebrating quiet at a taqueria in the Castro. Tacos al pastor dripping. Laughter free. We did it, Kendall whispered. Salsa sharp on tongue. Morgan nodded. Eyes shining. You did. We just caught up. Winter settled gentle. Holidays layered with new rituals. Christmas in Portland. Morgan's bookstore strung with lights. Readings of The Miseducation of Cameron Post. Her parents attended tentative. Apologies halting over eggnog. A bridge half built. New Year's in Times Square via TV. Then bed. Champagne fizzing. Toasts to tomorrows. Spring brought settlements. Funds earmarked for survivor aid. Kendall founding a legal clinic for queer youth. Pro bono battles against the ghosts. Morgan published her manuscript. Pecan prayers, verses of loss and reclamation. Dedication simple, for Kay. Who held the light. They moved in together proper. A Victorian in no valley. Creaky floors and bay windows framing sunrises. Mornings started slow. Coffee brewing. Morgan journaling while Kendall reviewed briefs. Evenings woon with wine and walks. Dogs bounding in the park. Future talk turning solid. Adoption papers in process. A boy from foster care with eyes like Morgan's. Curious and kind. But scars whispered still. Anniversaries of shocks triggering panic. Kendall bolting upright. Sheets twisted. Morgan learned the signs. Pulling her down gentle. Stories spun of their first diner spill. Laughter chasing shadows. Therapy continued. Joint now. A space where words wove tighter bonds. Summer road trip fulfilled dreams. Route 66 unfurling dusty. Stops at diners echoing Austin's. Motels with neon signs flickering. In a Grand Canyon overlook. Sunset painting rims gold. Kendall dropped to knee. Ring simple gold. Marry me? Not despite. But because. Morgan's yes was a sob. Embrace fierce against wind. Fall wedding small. Backyard affair in the valley. String lights and marigolds. Abuela officiating in her way. Blessings in Spanish. Vows exchanged under oak. Kendall's voice thick. You are my north. My fire. Morgan's reply. And you my home. Dance floor cleared for them first. Slow sway to at last, bodies fitting perfect. Years layered on. Clinic thriving. Book tours for Morgan. A second child. Girl with Kendall's curls. Anniversaries marked with pecans. Roasted and shared. Bitterness turned sweet. The lawsuit's echo faded. But impact rippled. Laws shifting. Centers closing nationwide. One evening. Porch swing creaking. Kids asleep inside. Kendall leaned into Morgan. Head on shoulder. Worth it all? Morgan kissed her temple. Voice soft. Every scar. Led here. Decades wove their pattern. Threads of joy and quiet ache interlacing. The children grew. Javier with his soccer cleats muddy from fields. Elena quoting Wolf at dinner. Eyes sparking debate. Kendall's hair silvered at temples. Laugh lines etching deeper. But her stride held fire. Courtrooms still her arena. Now mentoring young attorneys with cases echoing her own. Morgan's bookstore expanded. A chain of havens from Seattle to LA. Shelves groaning under voices once silenced. Retirement crept in gentle. Kendall winding down at 62. Partnership yielding to advisory. Days freed for hikes in Muir Woods. Redwoods towering like sentinels. Morgan closed the original shop with a party. Locals toasting with IPAs. Stories spilling of books that changed lives. This place was church, one patron said. Hugging tight. Morgan nodded. Tears pricking. The good kind. They traveled then. Unchecked. Italy's cobbled streets where gelato dripped on chins. Hands linked over pasta. In a Tuscan villa. Sunset gilding vines. Kendall reflected aloud. Never thought we'd have this. After everything. Morgan poured Chianti. Glasses clinking. We built it. Brick by stubborn brick. Home called always. San Francisco's hills a heartbeat. Fog rolling familiar. Grandkids arrived. Chaos of tiny feet and crayons. Javier's twins romping in the garden. Elena's boy tracing letters with Morgan's guidance. Family gathering swelled. Abuela's recipes passed down. Laughter echoing off walls painted fresh. Anniversaries marked milestones. 30 years with a vow renewal on that Oakland diner booth. Now a plaque commemorating. 40 brought Hawaii. Black sand beaches and luau's. Dances under palms. Bodies slower but synced. Still moves me, Kendall whispered. Hips swaying close. Health intruded soft at first. Morgan's diagnosis in their 70s. Arthritis flaring fierce. Then deeper. A shadow on scans. Doctors spoke measured. Options weighed over tea in sunlit kitchens. Kendall held vigil. Hands steady where Morgan's trembled. Stories read aloud from their shelf. Voices of women who loved through tempests. Treatments dragged. Chemo's grip loosening hair to wisps. But Morgan's wit sharpened. Jokes landing wry. Bald suits me. Like a monk. Kendall massaged scalps gentle. Evenings with puzzles and Netflix. Reruns of The L Word sparking memories. We were braver, Morgan said once. Curled on couch. Kendall shook head. We were us. That's enough. Remission came tentative. Scans clear. Celebrations subdued with cake and calls. They volunteered renewed. Kendall at legal aid. Morgan mentoring writers. Letters pouring in from those touched. One girl. 17 from Texas. Wrote of escaping her own center. Inspired by their story. You gave me words for the fight. Winters grew longer. Bones aching and damp. But love warmed constant. Mornings still coffee shared. Newspapers spread. Debates over headlines light. Afternoons naps intertwined. Breaths even. Dreams mingling unspoken. The end came peaceful. Spring bloom outside window. Birdsong filtering. Morgan slipped away mid-sentence. Hand in Kendall's. Story unfinished on lips. And then we. Wake was a gathering of lifetimes. Toasts to the woman who bound them. Bookstore packed with faces from pages turned. Kendall mourned raw. Days blurring gray. But purpose pulled. She finished Morgan's last manuscript. Echoes in the Orchard, published to acclaim. Proceeds to youth funds. Speaking tours followed. Voice steady. Sharing not just pain but grace. She taught me love isn't absence of hurt. It's presence through it. Years post. Kendall walked slower. Cane tapping rhythms. But eyes held spark. Grandkids visited. Stories spun of the woman who collected hearts like bookmarks. Javier built a shelf in her honor. Elena read passages at gatherings. One dawn. Balcony perch. Coffee steaming. Kendall watched fog lift. Bridge emerging gold. A sigh escaped. Deep. The kind carrying oceans. Morgan's locket hung heavy. Polaroid faded but fierce. Miss you, she murmured to the breeze. Wind stirred leaves. Almost answer. Legacy lived on. Clinic renamed Rivera Ellis. Cases one stacking. A documentary premiered. Their tale celluloid. Premiere tears and applause. Kendall attended. Javier's arm steady. Elena's hand squeeze. In quiet moments, she journaled. Pages filling with what-ifs turned gratitude. Love, she wrote, defies conversion. Therapy's crude hands. It roots deep. Blooms defiant. Sun crested. Warming face. And Kendall smiled faint. Heartful echo. The world turned. But they remained. Intertwined eternal. A testament whispered to winds.